Welcome back to episode 140 of The Wellness Woman. In today's episode, I'll be speaking to Paul Nison, who healed his ulcerative colitis with raw food, something most gastroenterologists do not advise on. Now, he has transformed his health and is helping others do the same. I want to just say that you do not have to be on raw food to be healthy, but if this is something that you want to explore, then listen on and take notes. Also, if you are facing any ailment or medical issues, please go to your doctor for advice, and this podcast is not meant to substitute any of it. Okay, before we get into the episode, I just want to share a big thank you to Nama Well for the J2, the best juicer in the world. I work with Nama because I love their ethos, I love the juicer, the milk maker, and everything they create in between. And I really appreciate how they commit to machines that last a long time, if not forever. They come even with a 15 years warranty. If you want to save on the J2 or any other machine, you can use my code Chantel10. I'll leave it in the show notes for you. Also, today, it's the last day for the giveaway entry, so make sure you go onto the Nama page and listen up to what you need to do. It's a little bit late, but maybe you can still enter and have a chance of winning the J2. All right, guys, good luck. And without further ado, let's get into the episode. Welcome, Paul. Hi, Paul. Thank you for joining me on The Wellness Woman. How are you today?
Very good. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you. So first of all, thank you for having me on your show. It was really nice to speak to you and meet you. And I learned a little bit about your journey after we talked. And I was very impressed. And I wanted to have you on the show, mostly because I think what you went through with your health journey can help even women. Because as we go through our perimenopause and menopause journey, a lot of us start having digestive issues that we never had before. That can really shut our life, because obviously without our digestive system working properly, a lot of the other systems don't. And so when I saw that you have reversed ulcerative colitis with food, and especially raw food, which goes against every protocol that a general gastroenterologist would recommend, I thought that was fantastic, because it does give hope to the fact that actually food is medicine in many cases, for the majority of part anyway, and that we have control, and that even if we have learned from a system that doesn't rely on food as medicine, that we cannot use food as medicine. In fact, we probably can. And a lot of us are testament of that. So if you can give a little introduction about who you are and how you started with your journey to people that don't know you, that would be amazing.
Sure, thank you. I grew up in New York and Brooklyn, and I was very much involved as a teenager in sports, competitive sports, and the only nutrition I know about was from that standpoint. I wanted to be the best at sports, so I tried to eat as well as I could to be the best, and that wasn't healthy. It's what even today in the common fitness field, bodybuilder's diet, so to say, is not a healthy diet, but it's gonna help people temporarily and possibly be the best at that sport, whether it's stimulation or steroid use or something. And so I didn't take steroids, but I was certainly trying to research and do the best that I could. But when I was 19 years old, I started developing stomach pains. Now, I've developed a lot of stomach pains prior to that, but at 19, they weren't going away. And then I started to have blood in my stool. So that led me on a path to go to the medical doctors who I worshipped at the time. And I had drug insurance. I don't call it health insurance. I call it drug insurance, but it doesn't pay for health. It pays for drugs. And they couldn't get me better. I was diagnosed with inflammatory bowel disease, also known as ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. And finally, I woke up and I started to realize the doctors didn't have the answers. So I looked elsewhere. I first went on a junk food vegan diet, not knowing there was any better. And then I ended up at a place called the Hippocrates Health Institute in West Palm Beach, Florida. And I learned about the raw food diet. And I've been doing that and been better from my conditions since. And I'm on a lifelong mission now to help others with educating themselves to know that they have more choices than the doctor gives them.
Amazing. And how did you find the Hippocrates Institute?
I ended up moving to Florida on a vegan diet, And I ended up I didn't know about the raw food diet yet. And I ended up going to a health food store, and I ran into Brian Clement, who was giving a lecture there. He's the director of Hippocrates. And then I checked them out, and I realized that I moved like a couple of blocks from where they were. So I went there, I learned about it. Then I went back to New York, and then I found the raw food group. I ended up being the chef at a at a restaurant, Caravan of Dreams, and then I actually opened my own raw food restaurant in New York City. To this day, it's the world's biggest raw food restaurant. It was 2 floors, and then I wrote a book about my experience.
Wow, Paul, that's amazing. I didn't know you actually were a chef as well. Is your restaurant still open?
The restaurant isn't open. It didn't stay open long. It was near the World Trade Center, and it was that long ago. But Caravan of Dreams, where I was the raw food chef,
Yeah.
they're still open. Yes.
Yeah, they have a great reputation. And I love that there are some food. I mean, I'm dying to find some raw food restaurants, but it's really, really hard in Southern Europe. I haven't found any in Portugal. There was one where I live now, but I think she was just doing it at the wrong time, and people were not ready for it. And veganism here, as itself, it's very much macrobiotic focused, so very overcooked, and it's always the same things. But people don't have that flair for different dishes. Lisbon is much better, but even then, they don't really have a lot of raw food options. There was only one restaurant that did, and somehow they also closed for some reason, and it was very sad. But I love that you explored so much that you had businesses that were aligned to your calling and to your healing path. So when you started when you realized that the doctors couldn't do anything for you, well, first of all, what kind of diet did they say that you had to follow according to them?
Well, it was interesting because every time I went into a flare, because when you have inflammatory bowel disease, you get a flare, they said, stay away from dairy until you're better. I would stay away from dairy, I would get better, and then they would say, okay, now you can eat dairy again. And that's what they said. And so they had part of it right. I mean, because dairy and wheat are two of the triggers for inflammation. So, but then I went back and ate dairy again and came back, and I finally made the connection.
Mm. And what about when it came to fiber? Any discussions about that at the time?
We really didn't have any discussions about diet at all. They just said stay away from dairy until you're better. And I remember I asked her at one point, is there any connection between diet and my condition? She said, no, there's no medical studies to prove there was any connection.
That is very interesting. I met recently, maybe in the last 2 years, someone that has IBD and especially Crohn. And this person was told by their doctors to stay away from fiber and to eat a very fiberless diet. So, white rice, and if they have any grains, and white pasta, and then lots of meat, and to stay away from cruciferous vegetables. And I was trying to explain to this person that actually these vegetables will heal the gut, because it's all about reinstating the gut microbiome and really repairing the wall, but that it takes time and it needs to be done mindfully. And I didn't know he had this problem when he came to one of my workshops, which I did, and was all about making cheese with cashew nuts, basically with non-dairy cheese. And I didn't know he had this, and he said, I felt a bit heavy after, and I had some bloating, but then I found out that he had IBD, and I said, well, you should have told me. I could have told you what to have and what not, but I'm glad you're okay now. And then the conversation started, and this person is very young, and he really believes that he has to be on this medication forever, and that plants are just not his friends. So tell me your journey into healing, though, because obviously when you stopped listening to the narrative that you basically have to go on and off dairy, and that plants and diet have nothing to do with it, and you started making the connection. What was your transition from a vegan to raw?
I first want to say that I did something you said is I have to say I agree with the doctors, because when you're in an inflammatory bowel flare-up, recommend somebody with inflammatory bowel disease, they're going to be very careful with leafy green vegetables, very careful with fiber. They should eat fiberless foods or even no food. I often recommend a juice fast until they are healed. And then they can go back to eating fiber, but they weren't completely wrong, the doctors, because fiber can aggravate the inflammation. So we need to be clear to the people because it's important.
Yeah, okay. So in fact, let's be clear about this. There is a stage of, there has to be an elimination diet, because if you are obviously inflamed, anything you put in there is going to create more inflammation. What I meant by we need to reconstitute the microbiome is after the inflammation has gone down, then the inserting of the food cannot be like, I'm going to have a massive salad. You really have to do it very strategically, to the point that, when I speak to my friend, Dr. Will Balsovitz, he always says, if you need to start with one chickpea in order for you to have chickpeas, you need to start with one. Like even a tablespoon could be too much. And I think this is where we don't have that education, or it seems stupid to us because it's like, who's going to eat one chickpea? But even that one chickpea is actually going to feed a new set of bacteria. So you need to repopulate very, very slowly, because now your gut basically is not used to it. But this is also what gives that, I think, that famous highlight to the carnivore diet, because people that have digestive issues and struggle with fiber, they will find relief going on a carnivore diet where there is no fiber, and they think that that's the proper diet for them, when long term we know that that's actually not the way to do it. So reverting back to how you actually transition and how you did it, because of obviously these problems, you couldn't just go and eat these massive amounts of salads. How do you transition?
Well, I mean, I've learned today a lot more than I knew 30 years ago when I was dealing with this. But there are stages, like we say. If you're in an inflammatory stage, it's a little different than if you're between stages. If you're on medication, then you're not on medication. So, and also a person's, their idea in their mind, because you will get better no matter what disease you're doing if you're going to change your diet and your lifestyle. But it will take a lot more work. It's a lot easier and quicker to just take a drug to deal with the symptoms instead of dealing with the cause. I mean, and some people, that's what they'd rather do. My best friend was diagnosed with colitis, and I was explaining this to him, and he said, I'd rather have the surgery and get everything done quickly and done with, and he did. And thankfully, he's been okay from the colitis issue. But so we got to understand the people's mindset, and not everyone's willing to do the hard work that it takes. So for me, I did the research and continued to do the research, and switched over to. I went 100%. Because I knew that this was good, and I pretty much started doing the Hippocrates way of eating. Thankfully, I was between a flare. I wasn't doing a flare, or that wouldn't have been ideal because of the high fiber. But I did that, and so over the years I've switched off between Hippocrates style of eating and natural hygiene style of eating. Pretty much Hippocrates with fruit, and I never had the issue. The issue is gone because I've eliminated the cause, not only dealt with the symptoms. But it's an emotional thing too. So, as when you're working with people, you got to see where their mindset is and what they're willing to do and understand what they're doing. And so for me, that was a big part of it. But for me, as long as I stayed on the diet, I knew I was going to be healthy. And the only time I got off the diet over all these years was at the time I loved dairy products when I first was sick, but I was drinking the drugged up cow milk from the store, so I didn't know better. And after about 10 years of doing this and being better, somebody explained, well, that's the problem. You were eating the drugged up milk. If you have raw milk, it would have been so much better, and so on. So I tried to experiment to see, because at that point, after doing it for 10 years, I wanted to know, well, if this is true, I want to know. I want to teach people the right way. So I started to experiment with raw milk, and I was able to do it for a little while, but then after some time, I ended up getting sick, and I started not feeling well. And then I said, I'm going to do what's been working all these years, and I know it just wasn't the drugged up milk. It's all dairy is not good for us. So it was a learning lesson, and so when people say that, I'm always curious to know when somebody says something that makes sense. I was willing to try, but I learned, and I never had an issue with being on the raw diet. I just was curious. Well, is that the case? My friend Jordan Rubin, who teaches about healing from colitis and Crohn's, he took a different approach, and he's really into fermented dairy products and eating animal meats and so on. And he's had his own success dealing with it. So there's more than one way to be successful at this, and there's so much more than just food when it comes to our health. So much more, and I'd say with colitis itself, it's a very connected to our emotional state. So a lot of people that suffer from digestive issues in general usually are not, uh, you know, good from an emotional standpoint, whether they know it or not. And I definitely wasn't. So that does make a difference as well.
I can relate. I had IBS for the longest time, and although I know that it came also from high antibiotics used when I was a child, it definitely had a lot to do with my emotions because I always noticed that when I was most stressed, especially when I was at work, it was worse. And when I was on holiday, for example, I could have the same food that would trigger me back home, and I had no reaction to it. So I certainly know that the emotional state is a powerful one when it comes to our digestive system. Can you delve a little bit deeper into what you meant though by your emotional state? What was going on in your life that made you feel that you were not in balance?
Well, as we're brought up as children, we're not taught certain things in life. We're not taught how to handle money. We're not taught how to handle relationships. We're not taught how to handle our health. You know, the school systems around the world will teach us how to 1 + 1 = 2 and how to spell, which are important topics, but nobody teaches us about, money, relationships, and health. And these things are the reasons why most suicides happen around the world. And these are really important issues. If we're taught right and we handle those areas, it will help us a lot. And then from a spiritual standpoint, there's a lot of confusion out there, and it's another thing I wasn't taught growing up. So between my lack of knowledge about health, my lack of knowledge about relationships, my lack of knowledge about money, and having no spiritual focus in my life, I was like most people, just walking around trying to do things myself and, pridefully thinking I could handle everything and not having any direction on how to handle everything. And yes, I did get well physically by changing my diet when I learned about the healthy aspect of it, of the food. But until I was able to figure out, well, nobody ever taught me this stuff about money, about relationships, and about, like I said, health. These are the things people are committing suicide about. So they're very emotional issues, and they don't just create disease; they lead to death in many areas. Because besides just food, our emotional state can determine our health as well. So, if somebody gets their life in order in every area, that's going to help them stay healthy. Because no matter how well you eat, if you're still messed up emotionally and financially and just spiritually, you're not going to experience the great health that we were designed to live.
Yeah. You mentioned, actually, let's stay on the topic of emotions because I think it's really important. It's going to help people a lot more, especially as we are in a time where I think we're becoming less educated and aware about how to build relationships because now we're all really communicating through screens. And although I appreciate what technology has done for us, I mean, you and I are in two different sides of the world and can communicate and talk and share these conversations. But at the same time, when it comes to even personal relationships, everyone is doing it online, which is taking away that capability of connecting to another human being and this there is like that energetic that you can only feel when you're in the presence of someone you can't really say when you are on the screen. And how how is this like how did you manage to basically bring a little bit of order in your life when it came to relationships and understanding and learning how they needed to be built properly? Then we can move on to the money as well because I think it's also a very important topic.
Well, to be honest with you, I had no spiritual life growing up. I had no spiritual focus. I was pretty much an atheist. And after I got healed physically, I had very bad relationships, and the money was, something I worshipped and not was something I looked at with the right attitude. And each person has their own path, but for me, I developed a relationship with Jesus Christ, and it really put priorities in my life in a different order. And when I did that, everything else started to come into place.
Did did you go into church or did you start practicing on your own and reading scriptures on your own?
Well, what happened was I was reading. I was at a lecture at a place in Michigan, and somebody said, "Your health book is a great health book, but I know a better health book." I said, "What is it?" They said, "If I give it to you, will you read it?" I said, "If it's a great health book, of course." I said, "Does it talk about raw food?" They said, "Yes." I said, "Does it talk about people living a long life?" They said, "Yes." I said, "Well, I want to know what it is." And they handed me a Bible. And at that point in my life, I had never read the Bible. I only knew one scripture in the Bible, which was Genesis 1:29, that said the food for men is fruits and vegetables. So I had this Bible that I wanted to read, but I didn't know where to begin reading it other than the front, but it was a big book. And somebody told me to start reading in the Gospel of John. And that's when I was introduced to Jesus and reading about the things he did in life. And I found it hard to believe, but when I did more research, I found out it wasn't a fiction book, it was a history book, and this stuff really happened. So I accepted Jesus as my Savior, and then I started to explore going to churches, and then I saw problems with churches because they weren't following what Jesus said to do. So from that point, I started to look further, and I started to try to model my life after the character that Yeshua told us to live by. And it really helped put my relationship and the priorities in my life in the proper order, and that's what helped me. Not just the food. Even before that, I would worship food, I would worship money, and I would be prideful. But it taught me humility. It taught me the character of Yeshua, and I just didn't have that in my broken relationships.
I was researching Yeshua's belonging to the Essenes, and so raw food was actually at the center of how they ate. And then you probably know that conspiracy came out, and they are talking about how the Essenes and the Nazarenes were like it's the same thing. Actually, it's the path is not a city where he was born, but more like a group, a tribe in a way.
So
Uh,
yes, yeah, but I've always been intrigued by the Essenes, but I did the research, and I don't necessarily agree with 100% of what they're teaching because it doesn't line up with the scriptures. But I know you have somewhat familiarity with not only the Essenes, but you were explaining earlier in your past relationship about the Hebrew Israelites and that, which is kind of different than the Essenes. So I have a lot of knowledge about the Hebraic lifestyle, which is more in line with Scripture than the Essenes. The Essenes, and the teachings by Christ Spiracy and Cam Waters, who I've interviewed on my show and I know pretty well, is really interesting information, and it's something I explore, and it's but whatever anyone believes in this world, no matter what their spiritual focus is, no matter what they want, I tell everyone, and it's the truth, you can't go wrong by following Yeshua. I would challenge anyone in this world to tell me one negative thing that Yeshua taught that would make their life worse and not better. So people can call themselves whatever they want and follow whatever they want. You can't go wrong by following because he set the character of the way we should be if we want harmony in our lives.
yeah, 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 definitely a teacher, an amazing teacher. It's just that people like to be in boxes, and that's probably where we go wrong a lot of the times. I don't know.
Yeah, well, when it comes to that, people, there's a lot of books out there about Yeshua. But for me, the Bible says all I need to know about him. I don't need anything extra. I like to explore and listen, but if you're looking at the Bible and you look at what his message was, nothing more is needed. It's such a freeing, blessed teaching life that you could live and just know. And that's what changed the most is it was all about like I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this. But now that I have him in my life, I know that he's there helping me on every step of the way. I'm not doing it alone, and that helps tremendously from an emotional standpoint to get through it and past it.
Amazing. And so that's beautiful. And I think it does give a lot of guidance, and a lot of people would need guidance these days. So relationships and looking at finances. I mean, money is an expression of energy at the end of the day. And it's more about not being obsessed with getting it to achieve materialistic things, but actually doing good things. So for example, in your case, what I see that you have developed is these ways to help people with educating them about the path to health. And so can you tell me a little bit, obviously, first of all, how did you decide to become a chef and then moving from chef to writing books and then creating material that can actually help people get better?
Yeah, well, the money aspect is simple. There was a fellow named David Ramsey, and he taught people how to get out of debt with a very common sense biblical approach, how to get out of debt. And it works. It worked for me, and it works for anyone. But it's the basic concept is live like no one else now, so later on you could live like no one else. It's getting out of debt,
Yeah.
and debt is the issue. And as for how I did it was, you know, I've never did something looking for the business opportunity. I've always done something living for where my passion was and my focus is. So my focus is helping people that are suffering, to let them know they have other choices. Uh, Even for YouTube and stuff. I mean, let me put it this way. If I want to be rich overnight and make a lot of money, I wouldn't open a raw food restaurant. I'd open a McDonald's. But my passion and my drive isn't about putting my priority of being financially secure like that over my other priorities. So what's our main priority? And my main priority is I want to help people get better. And sometimes opening a raw food restaurant is going to help a lot more people get better than McDonald's. So so that's why it's easy with my channels. I was travel when I wrote my book, and I would travel around doing food lectures. This was before the internet was really popular. Um, I would travel around doing book tours. Now, thanks to the internet, I don't have to because it's a lot harder to travel because I have a big family. But it's definitely something that's attainable. I was sitting in a restaurant one day, and it was Caravan of Dreams, and I was not at a good time in my life, but I was even better healed physically. And the owner, Angel, came up to me and said, "Do I know anyone who knows how to make raw food?" And I said, "Yeah, I make raw food all the time. I've been on a raw food diet." So he hired me as a chef there, and I was a chef there for a while. And then at the time, Mayor Giuliani was closing down all of he was cleaning up the city, let's say. And there was a popular dance club in the city that he was closing down, and the owner of the dance club and several of the dancers lived in the neighborhood came to the restaurant often, and the owner of that place said, that the mayor closed it down, but she has a big place and she wants to open it to a raw food restaurant. Pretty much gave me the keys to do that. And so God opens up our doors, in our lives, and when we follow and listen to Him, we get the outcome that He wants us to have.
I love that. I love also that the Caravans of Dreams owner's name is Angel.
Yes.
You cannot make it up. So yeah, it's beautiful. And so you said you have a big family. So definitely that meant your relationship was solid and you met someone that had the same vision as you did.
Uh, yes and no. I mean, my relationship prior to that, I was in a not the best situation. I ended up having children, and I ended up getting a divorce. And but my priorities were set, and I had my prayer life was good enough, and thankfully, I somebody came into my life who's we had the same priorities and same vision, and so I did it from a new standpoint, from this the I just did it from a smarter way of doing it, and so now I had more children, and now a very successful relationship after having a life of unsuccessful ones, and I know this one's going to stick, so I feel good about that every day.
That's beautiful. Congrats. And when it comes to
And my
obviously,
wife's an amazing raw food chef as well.
oh,
Absolutely amazing.
amazing.
Yeah.
So she
And
eats like you as well.
she doesn't eat like me, but we do hold raw food events at the house.
Okay, tell me a little bit about that because it's something. Do you open it to the public?
Yeah, we
Okay, tell me
do.
a
We
little bit
do raw
about
food events here. We open it up to the public, and we do lectures, and people love that. Sometimes
it.
I've had retreats, and we might do more retreats coming up soon as well.
Fantastic. And you do them, you're based in New York still?
No, I'm in West Palm Beach, Florida, actually right next to a Hippocrates Health Institute.
Ah, fantastic. You went
Yeah,
to
so what I've created here was from the diet standpoint, I want to live in an environment where I could eat the food I grow.
Mm.
So about 80% of the food I eat, I grow myself. I have a fruit farm. I have over 100 fruit trees, and I teach about and learn about the wild edible herbs that we could eat. And so that's what my focus is on. I have another YouTube channel that teaches people how to grow a lot of things in small spaces.
Oh, that's fantastic. We have to put everything in the show notes. I
Yeah.
have an eco-friendly, I have a sustainability project here in Portugal that I started as well. And every year, I mean, you know how it is with government. They just tick boxes when they have to do the right thing. They don't do the right thing. But I use that platform to go to schools and to teach them about plant food and moving away from animal flesh. And how to grow food is a big priority. So I'm now opening a not-for-profit to really go deep, and hopefully we can become an NGO to then invest in regenerative agriculture to support communities. So my aim is to allow students of agriculture to grow their own food in an organic and sustainable way. We will cover all the cost. They can sell the food at a cost of normal, not organic food, even if the food will be organic and certified, but we cover the cost so they can sell it at a normal price. Because now in Europe, we are facing the same issues you have in the US, which is because of companies like Monsanto and in here in Europe being Bayers, our politicians are being bought over. And so now GMOs are no longer banned. They are going to be accepted widely and they don't need to be labeled. So a lot of us don't even know if the food that we eat is going to be non-GMO. And I refuse to give in to such a system that lies about the fact that we don't have enough food. The reason we don't have enough food is because people are not taught how to look after the land. Everybody is just killing plants and putting cement on the floor, not to bother with the weeds, and which, by the way, a lot of weeds are actually edible medicinal plants like dandelion, and they're just straying us away from nature when nature is the only thing that can keep us from really burning up, literally, especially with the summer. I don't know how it is in the US, but here it is the hottest summer.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's
Well, I am really one of my favorite models in life is eat the weeds. I mean, I'm in the press right now of uploading a video to my YouTube channel about the weeds I eat on a daily basis for my lunch. But even though I grow a lot of fruit, we call it food forest here in South Florida. But even though I have a lot of fruit, the weeds are more powerful. For example, of the 100 fruit trees I have, the most important tree I have is a moringa tree and just some other wild edible greens. And that's what I tell people. Look, you can sprout indoors no matter where you are, so you don't need a garden to grow your food. And the thing is with the weeds, once you learn about the edible herbs wherever you live, there's 90 to 95% of the herbs that you walk over every day and find on the street are edible. You just got to know the ones that aren't, and it's amazing how much you can't buy food that's as nutritious as the wild edible weeds that are out there. You can't buy that food. It's amazing. And just think about this. I mean, one of the most horrific situations in the world ever was, like situations like this. The only way is the Holocaust, and the only way, or a big way that the government's going to control us is food and water. So if we could provide it ourselves, we don't have to be succumb to that. But from the video, a lot of videos I seen the Holocaust, people didn't have food, they were starving, and that makes them act a certain way. But there were all these weeds all around them. The Native Americans in the past knew how to use these weeds and live off them, and there's still cultures around the world that do. But then when the Americans, or not the Americans, when people came to this continent, they would walk along and people would be sick and they would die right there on the path, but there were weeds right next to them that could heal them, and they just didn't know. The Bible says, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge." And it's yes, what we do with that knowledge is important, but with AI today, it's like, money can be a very good thing or a bad thing. It's just the intention you have with it. Well, the same thing with AI. And you could just take a picture of any weed in your neighborhood with AI and say, "What is this?" And it's edible. Is it edible? And it'll tell you pretty much what you need to know. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Because I know there's two camps now, the haters of AI and the lovers. I'm like, look, it's here to stay. So either you're going to use it to better yourself and better your life, or yeah, you're going to be dependent on a technocratic society that doesn't care about you. But then it doesn't make a much of a difference to how you live now without AI, because you were always dependent on the system by not knowing how to grow your food, by not knowing what to even eat, by being sick all the time, by going to a doctor for literally anything, and the only way that they know how to support you is by giving you medication. So there is not much difference. So you use AI in the right way, you know. It is.
Here's the thing, my before I got a phone that had phone numbers in it,
Mhm.
I used to know people's phone numbers. I remembered their phone numbers. But then when you get a phone with numbers in it, you don't remember them. You don't need to. And I used to get around before the internet with maps. I know how to read maps and so on. My daughter just told me the other day that her phone wasn't working, so she doesn't know how to get anywhere. It's just we get you
Dependent.
know dependent on certain things, and this is why I tell people, like, I'm dependent on Jesus Christ, Yeshua HaMashiach. So I pray, get me there safely, or give me directions, and he speaks to me. But when we're dependent on something that's made by a man, we're really depending on the man that made it, or the person that made it. So that's something we need to be aware of. So it's okay if you depend on your phone for phone numbers, but you got to understand your phone number is now your master. Well, if it's something a man made, now that man's your master, because without that, what are you going to do? So we should know how to survive without those things. We could use them, but we should know how to survive without them. So those things are very helpful, but we should know how to survive without them.
Absolutely. Those are skills that are, I mean, survival skills is an understatement, but also they keep us sharp, you know, they keep us, and also they keep us connected to our intuition, which, if anything, that's really, I think, the doorway to our soul, because we ultimately know things innatively. I really think the intuition is this beautiful connection to the divine, where we come from. So we have shut it down, which is there is a reason because why the system has done that. And plants are a way also to connect, you know, everything that is created without any agenda. I mean, I in my office at work, I mean, you can see a little, but I have plants everywhere. Like I live with plants and I talk to them. And even though it's so hot right now, and my office is like a little fishbowl because I have these massive windows, they are alive. You know, I'm like, do you need to drink? I give them water, and I'm like, okay, you'll be fine. And let's spray them. And I talk to them, and they're really thriving even in this environment. So
Well,
they're
yeah.
alive. They're alive, you know?
So people don't understand, like, so we live at a very important time, and without this knowledge, we're going to be in trouble because, there's something called grounding. When we step up barefoot on a grass or barefoot on the beach, we are electrical beings, and this is the way we were created. And based on what we do and how we live is either going to make us uh, healthy, or it's going to take away our electricity or the flow of it. And so what are people to do in concrete cities and so on, and you got to investigate. So I have my own yard, and if you have a yard, you should step on it barefoot every day. Now, I haven't looked into the technology yet of getting a rod and put it in the ground and touching in my bed and mattress and all that stuff. People making money off of what's free. I haven't gotten into all that stuff, but I make sure I step on the ground. But I just not too long ago found out, I always heard the phrase, well, hug a tree. It sounds like a good, cool thing to do. But all of the, that electricity that's in the ground is in a tree. So if you're in a big city, instead of stepping barefoot on the ground, you could touch that tree and you're still getting, it's like you're grounding by touching the tree. So it is pretty amazing. Now, how much more amazing if you're standing barefoot and touching a tree? Even more amazing. But now we have the electricity in the air they call dirty electricity, which is the all the EMFs and everything else. So this is competing with that. So we need to put ourselves in a situation where we're not competing with the electricity to keep us healthy and alive. And this is the most important thing that not a lot of people understand or teach about, but we spend 90% of our time indoors. And it's absolutely terrible. No, you don't just get vitamin D from the sun. You get that electricity from the sun. And the sun rays aren't, if you use it with wisdom and you don't get sunburned, they're going to keep you alive. So That's the only thing that's going to fight the EMFs is getting outside and getting in the sun and the rays that are out there. Again, you could spend money and try to protect it from getting your house, but no, get outside and get the sun rays. And it's so important to do so. And we don't understand that when the light and darkness connection, not just from a spiritual standpoint, but from a physical standpoint, is so powerful. And when we're out there with the sun, it sets our body in a circadian rhythm that's so important for health. And most people are indoors and staying up late at night and doing it backwards. Electricity is the one word people need to study, because if you want to truly be healthy, the sun, the electricity are so powerful. And the fact that we spend 90% indoors, people say, why are vegans and raw fooders not as healthier than the average person eating a standard American diet? Because they're spending time indoors. They're not moving enough. We need to move, and we need to move outdoors.
I agree. During the summer, one of my biggest pleasures, it's unfortunate I cannot record the podcast from there because the public, it's a library, and this library, the very old library, so it's all wood inside, which again, because it's wood and stone, very natural material. But then at the back, you would not know if you walk by it because it's in the city center. But the back is this beautiful, I call it the magic garden. It's a beautiful garden. You can sit in it. I have a couple of seats under the trees, and it's just, it's even if it's super warm, if you sit under that tree, you're fine. You're comfortable. And it is the most beautiful place to work from. And I wish I could even record podcasts from there if it were quiet enough. But it's true. Like, even if you're in a city, you can find these little pieces of heaven, really, and just try to spend as much time there as you can, just to connect with nature. And instead of trying to kill everything that is nature.
Yeah, somebody told me the other day, a farmer, he says, oh, it's so hot out there. I'm like, yeah, it's a lot hotter when you're eating cooked food. And
Yeah.
he's like, what do you mean? He didn't even get it. But I was like,
Yeah, if it's true, actually, I handle the heat quite well because I eat raw. So as we discussed, like the only thing I don't eat raw is tofu, but I eat it cold because, like, from the fridge. But everything else is raw, and I really feel like my body temperature is so easily adapted to even these kind of weather. So it definitely makes a difference. And I notice if I eat high fat, for example, if I eat nuts and seeds, because now I'm also thermogenically trying to expand that energy, I am dying in this weather. Like, I cannot do it. But it is wonderful when you have all these water-rich food. Um, I know that we're running out of time, but I have one more question. So you mentioned the Hippocrates Institute, and you live really in the zone where, like, you have the Hippocrates. So Brian is there. Have you met Dr. Morse? Because you mentioned the hygienist Mike.
I've interviewed him on my YouTube channel several times. I haven't met him personally.
Oh, you should really go and see him. It's
Yeah.
fantastic. Yeah, he's a great guy. And how did you find the teachings of Dr. Moore's differ? I mean, I know what the answer is, but like for people that don't know, differing from what the Hippocrates Institute shares.
So, for people that don't know, Hippocrates Health Institute, they teach a lot about sprouting and getting that's called living foods and not just raw foods. And they don't recommend a lot of fruit for people who are suffering from advanced stages of disease, which they deal with people like that. And Dr. Morse teaches pretty much close to a fruitarian diet as you can be, and so they are quite different in their teachings. The person I interview a lot of people, and I really connected with Dr. Fred Bishy, who's 96 years old, and he's been on a raw food diet for a long time. And so he gives me a lot of understanding about teaching about the way it should be. I think people have to find out what's going to work for them. And I tell everyone, no matter what they're eating, no matter how they're eating, no matter what they want to label it, is if it's working for you, there's nothing to change. Do what works for you. But then the question comes, well, how do you know it's working for you? So that becomes the question. And I think it goes beyond just, I feel good. You got to look at, I think your blood work will help you tell if it's working for you. Of course, your sleep is going to help tell you if it's working for you. So there are these other things that are going to tell you if what you're doing is working or not working. And, if somebody wants to eat Hippocrates' way or Dr. Morse's way, or no matter what they're doing, like, for example, you brought up the carnivore diet earlier. So it says, do what's working for you. So if somebody says, well, this is working for me because I feel great, whatever, it's like, well, the reason you're feeling great is not because you're eating meat. It's because you gave up all the other crap. And but if it's working for them at that point in their lives, then good. But how do you know? That's the thing. So do the research to know how you know it's working. Are you able to, so what do you consider working? It's not just how you feel. There's a lot more to it.
Yeah, I think with the carnivore diet, I mean, I don't think it's very much gray area. It's really black and white when we are really logical about it and we are scientific about it, because I have seen that the way they justified this working is also by stating that a high cholesterol is completely fine without the nuisance of, well, are you checking your ApoB? Are you checking your Apo little a? Like there are so many other markers that are so much more important than even your HDL and LDL, but you are seeing LDL skyrocketing and telling people it's okay that that happens. And to me, people that do that online as these influencers, even if they're doctors, it is actually quite worrisome, because there are a bunch of people that don't know how to read studies. They don't know how actually what feeling good means. I mean, they feel better, as you said, they're cutting out all the junk because they went on this carnivore diet and they're only eating meat and butter. But which I actually, honestly, do you know any lions that eat butter? Because I don't. And I, from South Africa, so, but I'm like, yeah. So they're eating all these things and saturated fats, despite the science, to justify a movement that has made a lot of people quite wealthy. So again, going back to the intention, because if you're sharing, I don't know, I just feel like always when I share information, I'm like, look, this is what right now, this is the evidence supports what I'm saying. Should it change at some point, I'm gonna have to be honest enough to say it, to say actually this has changed. I learned something new. This is what it shows now. And then make a decision. For example, I know that I am also vegan for the animals. I'm not just plant-based for health anymore. And I know that if tomorrow the science said, well, actually, a plant-based diet is not good for you, I think I might have to just stay on it, because I value the life of these beings just as I value human life. And I don't think I could eat flesh anymore.
Absolutely. And about, with the blood test, the raw food is, or a lot of vegans do it the same way. They say on the other end, they were like, oh, it doesn't matter if I'm too low in something because, they do it the other way and they don't even know, we don't need blood tests. We don't need to monitor this stuff. And, so it's, but if somebody's, by all, don't get me wrong, the way we feel has something to do with everything. And if I was sick and I started eating carnivore and I got better, I would be telling everyone also. And that's what a lot of people are sincerely doing. But a lot of people are money motivated as well. So each person has to see where they're at. But for me, I just see, like I said, I see things out of a biblical lens. And I tried to go back to the original and go back to, if you want to call it nature or creation or whatever. In the Garden of Eden, this is the way we were created to eat, is fruits and vegetables. Now, the Bible does say you can eat meat. I have my thoughts and reasons why it says that, but somebody could justify eating it and say, well, that's what it says. Somebody can say, I have high cholesterol, but my uncle ate meat and he lived a long time. So everyone can justify what they're doing. So we've each got to, as much as I would like to see people eat better, we each got to get to a point where it's like, okay, if that's where you're at, that's where you're at. We're all on a journey. And that goes back to the relationship thing we were talking about. We want to, whether it's a business standpoint with our practice or whether it's whatever it is, we want to help people because we think they're doing something wrong that they could do better. And we got to get to some point in our life where we say, this is what I found to be the best. But if you're not ready for it, I could respect that and move on. And I think it's terrible what people eat for the terrible abuse that takes on animals and everything else. But like my father eats animals, but I'm not going to stop visiting him because he eats animals. That's where he's at. I'm not going to stop loving him because he eats animals. But I'm going to pray for him that he'll come to see that it's absolutely terrible and hypocritical to have a house pet and still eat animals. But
Yeah, I know. And it's a tough one for me because one of my dogs, she's allergic to everything and she cannot eat plants. And she can only eat two kind of animals. And every time I feed her, I'm just like, oh my God. It's like it kills me. But I'm like, okay. But I try to give her, sometimes she's weird. Sometimes she will eat fruit like watermelon, which I'm happy about. Um, but the other dogs I have, they're completely fine. They eat all the veggie food and they're happy and they're healthy. And there are so many good brands. And we know that even cats, if they're given a vegan, well-formulated food, not homemade, can thrive. I have Dr. Andrew Knight, or Professor Andrew Knight, who is a vet but also professor, who spent his career really looking at the impact of food, animal food, on the planet for eco-friendly, ecological reasons, but also understanding how to feed our pets a vegetarian, vegan diet so that the impact is changed. Because a lot of us don't understand. We think the same food that goes to humans actually goes to animals, but that's like a whole different chain. They're given the scraps on top of it, but they also have a contribution to another subset of the industry. So imagine, like, if we're talking billions of animals going to slaughter. Anyway, it's a terrible thought, as we know. So Paul, tell me a little bit how people can find you, and also what projects you have coming up so that they can follow you and get on board with the new teachings and books, anything you're sharing.
Sure. On YouTube, my main health channel is Raw Life Health Show. I also have a member website with the same name, rawlifehealthshow.com. And my fruit tree channel is Fruitful Trees, where I teach people how to grow food. And then my Bible channel is Torah Life Ministries. So those are the best ways to get in touch with me. My email is paul@rawlife.com. And I'm here in South Florida. I do consultations if people have an illness and they want to know how to get better, or if they just want to eat better, I do that as well. As for future projects, I'm passionately making videos and interviewing people and trying to help people educate themselves. And at the same time, in humility, trying to accept that most people will hear, but they won't listen and follow, and trying to find out, not letting it get to me, and just realizing I did my part by telling them, and what they do with that information is up to them. And that's that.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll catch up soon.
Thank you for having me. Keep up the great work you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul, for being on the podcast and sharing your journey and work. And guys, thank you for listening. And if you were inspired by Paul's work and you want to know more, go into the show notes so that you can reach out to him and maybe take your health to the next level. I want to really thank you for listening. And also, if you are on Spotify or Apple or YouTube, please rate the podcast, share it with your friends so we can keep on growing. I appreciate you all. I love that you're here every week. And so thank you so much for allowing me to do what I love, which is making the world healthier. I'll see you next week.